Hi, everybody. Welcome to Fridays with Sue and Steph. And we have a guest. We're really excited. We have Dr. Dru Tomlin, principal at Heritage High School in middle school in Westerville City Schools in Westerville, Ohio. So, Dru, thanks so much for being here with us.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
And the reason we're here with Dru is because we were thinking about pain points in parenting. And one of the big pain points, I think for most of us, is that transition from 8th grade to high school. I don't know if there are any schools that are in the same building for that, but if your kid is going from that kind of like nurturing, smallish environment in middle school, sorry for the dog, and moving into high school in a big building with all new kids, it's overwhelming for the parents and the kids. So can you tell us, Dru, what is the biggest shock to students when they make that transition?
Well, as not only a middle school principal, but also the parent of 2 kids, and one is already in high school and one is currently going through this, I could say that there are several shocks that kind of happen along the way. I'd say the first is just that time moves really quickly. Right. And you've got to start making decisions with your child, not for your child, but with your child. So they feel not only, informed about the process, but involved about the process. So I say that's definitely one shock is just the time moves quickly. And I think you already mentioned it, the size of the school and the size of the kids. Right. So, a lot of our young adolescents coming out of 8th grade, some are already 6 foot whatever, and some are still 4 foot whatever, and then they're walking in these big hallways with ladies and gentlemen that are driving themselves to school, dudes already shaving and all that kind of stuff, and they're still walking around like, oh my gosh,
I'm stressed, Dru. I'm stressed listening to this. I am literally like feeling myself get tense. Yes.
Well, and honestly, you know what, in terms of, not to bring up, COVID and the pandemic, but one of the saving graces, one of the indirect benefits of COVID is we haven't been using our lockers at all. And so one of the things that kids don't have to worry about as they transition from 8th to 9th grade or going from middle to high school at this point is that they don't have to worry about, now where's my locker going to be? How am I going to fit everything in my locker? All that kind of stuff, because they just carry it with them wherever they go.
So Dru, you just saved a whole generation from having the I can't find my locker dream.
You know what? But what's been really great too is with that is a kid doesn't forget anything in their locker either. So once they get to class, right? If I'm a new kid in a high school and I've already gone from point A, which is way over here, all the way to point B where my next class is, and if I forget something in my locker, then but now I've got it on my back, I can go, I'm good. So you're right. That's one less stress they have to consider for sure.
What's the biggest shock to parents as their kids are transitioning to high school?
I think sometimes the gravity of the choices that are already out there, because course selection going into high school isn't just as simple as, let's pick the math, let's pick the language arts, let's, pick those core content areas. But now the shock is, all right, listen, these courses have to or should begin to, build towards what you eventually want to study and specialize in. So you're like, oh my gosh, my kid's still 13, 14, going on 15, and we're already talking about college and career. Like we're already making those kind of choices for our kid, even though they're just now starting their high school experience. So that could be a big shock in terms of their academic stuff. There's some behavioral shocks along the way too. I don't know if you want to get into that one.
Oh, sure.
Well, I could say that in the middle school, I'll do a little compare and contrast. And again, I know I'm probably painting with a broad stroke, but in the middle school experience, we do try to, create routines and structures and expectations for behavior, because with young adolescents, oftentimes it's the wonder years, right? They wonder what they're doing. We wonder what they're doing. And, if you give them too much independence without structure, then they don't quite know what to do with it and they lose their way, right? So we do emphasize dress code. We do emphasize, that kind of stuff. Whereas in high school, again, no, I'm painting with a broad stroke, but there are more allowances for, student freedoms with some of that stuff, like again, having their hats on in class or hoods and stuff like that, or earbuds in. And so those types of behaviors are then, our kids see them as they go into high school and they're like, wait a second, I can do that now? That doesn't seem like something I should do. So they start to have kind of I don't want to say a moral conflict, but it's like, I was kind of taught that this was what I was not supposed to do. And now I'm seeing it in kids that are older than me and, that kind of thing. So that could be a little bit of shock. There are kids that this is not allowed in high school, but they see it more often, is like kids that are vaping, kids that are, doing that kind of stuff too. So they're starting to see those behaviors in older kids and wonders to themselves, should I be doing that? Should I not be doing that? Now my the friends that I used to have in middle school are now maybe trying some of that stuff because either they want to or they feel pressured to. So what does a friendship mean? Do I, am I still friends with that person, even though I disagree with their behavioral choices? So that could be kind of a stress for kids, and then also for parents too, as they help their kids navigate those different social and behavioral, puzzles.
Okay, so we're going to ask you in a little bit for some suggestions about like how do you deal with some of that stuff. But I want to go back to the locker because I think there's a bunch of other things that fall into the locker category. Like when my oldest went to school, someone suggested that we go see the school beforehand and do a walkthrough and practice the lock on the locker. So that was a very easy thing that gave us a little sense of control. Are there other things like that you encourage kids and parents to do to kind of pave the way so that day one of school isn't like massive panic?
Yeah, it's interesting. There are a lot of instructional strategies that our teachers use for kids that I think families can use too. So there's something called the KWL chart that teachers use in their classes, and the K stands for what do you think you know? The W is what do you want to know? And then the L is what did you learn? So in addition to going and visiting a high school,
can you repeat that one more time? The
sure.
The
K is what do you think you know, right? What do you think you know about high school? And then the W would be what do you want to know about high school? And then the L is, what did you learn? And there's also, you can add an S on the end and say, what do you still want to learn? But that can be a way to, before you even hit the bricks of a high school campus or the virtual bricks, because I know a lot of high schools are doing virtual tours too. It's kind of like setting up the purpose of the visit. Like, what do you think you already know about high school? What are some of the, facts as well as some of the myths that you think about high school? And then what do you want to learn? Those are those questions. What, is it just about lockers, or is it about lunchroom? Is there going to be a map? Is there going to be, are there mentors to help me during the school day? That kind of stuff. And then the L part really comes in with celebrating what they've learned through the transition process, and then what questions are still lingering as they continue. So I think that could be a really helpful tool in addition to visiting the campus.
It's so great because it puts them in control of so much when a lot is swirling around that's not in control. So I love that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think too, there are networks, obviously, conversations like this, through your organization, but then there are other connections that you can make with other families that have been through it, so that's another thing too. Visiting the campus, doing those strategies, and then connecting with other people to, help reassure you that it's not as odious as you think it is. There are a lot of mythologies. There are some mythologies that are perpetuated at each level of transition, whether it's elementary to middle or middle to high. There's a myth of, oh, well, we got to get you ready for that next level. It's going to be so hard and it's going to be so rigorous. You better toughen up, kid. And I think that does a disservice to that next level. Like sometimes 8th grade teachers will say, well, we're not going to, check your planner anymore because we're getting you ready for high school. And then what I've found as a parent myself, as well as, someone who works with high schools in our district, is there's a lot of flexibility. Their teachers have flexible deadlines. Yes, there are some different rigors and some different levels of independence that they expect of kids, but there's also some flexibility as well. And it's all about relationships, and high school teachers are great on building relationships too.
It's like this balance of being prepared without being afraid because of the information we got. And that is where I think the parenting challenge comes in at its height, because we don't know. Like, you know, I want to tell a kid, you've got to learn this now because it's going to disappear next year. But maybe it won't, but maybe it will. So how do we, you know, like, how does that conversation look when you're not sure who the teacher is next year or how that school handles it?
Well, again, I think asking your kid, like, what are the best characteristics of a great teacher? What do you want a great teacher to be? What are you expecting yourself? You know, like, and I think that can be, again, putting them in the driver's seat with that kind of question is important. And to, you know, we really got to know your kid, and you really have to know what they are at this level able to, you know, what they're able to handle and what they're able to take in. You know, I think knowing the characteristics of young adolescents is really important, and knowing that they're trying to achieve not just in academic ways, but they're also trying to achieve in behavioral ways and social ways, moral, ethical ways. And so having conversations about not just the structures of school and what success at the academic level will look like, but how do you navigate all of those other parts of it too? And to know that every kid is at different stages of development with it.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. And you talk about structure, and the one place my head goes to where there's very little structure is the lunchroom. And, you know, and in particular, it's funny, I was talking to a friend whose daughter is in 9th grade now, and they didn't go in person till recently. And last year they had very organized lunches. This year, not so much. And they're left to fend, you know, for themselves. And I can even just sitting here talking about it, I'm thinking about walking into my lunchroom when I grew up on Long Island, New York, and I'm like starting to just sweat. So can you talk to us a little bit, like, how do you prepare the kids for that? That is just
for the
opposite
experience.
Structure.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is I would reach out to the school. I would reach out to the school early and just say, hey, listen, this is one of my concerns, and this is one of the concerns that my student has as well. Talk to me about what lunch looks like. Because it could be that the narrative of the chaotic lunch area and, like, you know, just the fear that's all, you know, wrapped up into that could be a big misconception, or it could be that it's like amplified when really that's not how it really is. So I'd say reach out to the school and ask those questions. See if you can even walk the cafeteria and have them explain like how the lunch process goes. That's one thing. And then in terms of the social aspect of lunch, which can be very prickly, especially if
that's more what I was referring to. Exactly.
So one thing that really helped, you know, my kiddo is finding out, like, all right, which of your friends, because you're not gonna be able to, not all your friends are going to have lunch at the same time you do, right? Because courses are scheduled at different times. It's not like in middle school, we have 6th grade lunch and we have 7th grade lunch and we have 8th grade lunch. So you can generally know when the different grade levels are going to be seated together. But in high school, at least from what I've heard in my experience too, is that it's mixed grade, right? So you could have a freshman with seniors and juniors and sophomores, all that kind of stuff. So the first thing that we did is look at his schedule, call up his buddies and say, hey, listen, which of your friends have the same lunch you do? And then work on a plan of, hey, we're all going to try to sit together. You know, we're all going to try to pack our lunch on this day. We're all going to buy lunch on that day, and we're going to try to sit together. So that's one thing to do. And then the other is if your kid is in the situation where, you know, they don't have a lot of friends to sit with during that, you know, their lunch experience, you know, having them talking positively about that. And that's hard, right? Because you want to honor their feelings of trepidation and hesitation and, oh my gosh, this is going to be the worst experience ever. But talking positively about the possibilities of sitting at lunch and maybe not knowing everybody, right? That there are new friendships, there are new relationships that you can build. There are kids that are going to be in the same situation that you're in. You know, when you go to, and you can even talk about it from a college and career readiness standpoint. Like when you go to a new job, you're going to have different, you know, employees and staff members that you are going to be working with. So this is kind of in that same way. So that can help as well.
I love that approach. I could just see my kid being like, well, that didn't help.
Right. Right.
So
And-
I had somebody say, I wish I could remember who to attribute this to, but somebody had a conversation with their kid. It might have been Judith Warner in her book, but about, so what are your plans? Like, let's go through, what are you going to do? What are you going to do if you're super uncomfortable in the lunchroom and you don't see anybody you know? Do you have a backup plan? Can you go to the library? Like, what are just so that the kid can wake up in the morning or even go to sleep the night before without a terrible stomach ache?
Yeah.
So those kind of things, I think the same way you said, ask your kid, what does a great teacher look like? You could kind of put out there, what does a successful lunch experience look like?
Right.
And then what's the backup plan? I don't know.
Yeah, I really like the way that you painted that. And I think as a former language arts teacher, I'm all about stories, right? And narratives. So having your kid like almost do a plot structure of like, all right, who are going to be, if your goal, if your, highest point of action is to have a successful lunch, who are the protagonists in that story, right? Like who's going to help you along the way? And then what are the potential conflicts for the rising action? And then what are some of the success points? What are some of the conflicts that you're going to experience to get to that point of, oh, I had a great lunch? And just know that, like you said, your kid could come back and say, well, that didn't work, right? And that is part of the journey.
I think this is how it goes.
Right.
Thanks, Mom.
Yeah.
That didn't work.
Totally.
Right. How was lunch today? Fine.
Or sucked.
I was going to say fine. I think fine's a great outcome.
Yeah.
Fine. But see, fine is a very dangerous F word. I'm telling you. Because, kids will say it, but that underneath the surface, there's a lot of other
My
stuff.
husband knows it's a danger.
Right. Exactly.
All right, Drew, let's wrap this up with what is it going to look like next year as kids? Some kids haven't had school in person at all. Some kids have had hybrid models, every variation on that. How are you anticipating September or August if it's August?
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of what we've been experiencing here in our district. We're back in 100%. All kids came back. And what we emphasized.
When did that happen, Drew? When?
It happened early March. March 8th is when our district decided to go all back in, 100% of kids. And what we emphasized is reassurance to both students and families, right? Because we need to make sure that our students and families understand the safety protocols and things like that we put in place, because we understand that there may be some trepidation about being all in at school. So, and I'd say from a parent standpoint, from a family standpoint, talking with your student about, hey, listen, your school's got your back. Your school has this safety precaution, this. And then we also emphasized to our staff and then also to our students and families about relationships. Like right now, yes, there may be some academic achievement gaps, right? Some kids who have had access to technology, so they're able to do their homework, and other kids not. That's a reality. But first, we've got to work on the relationships and the SEL, the social emotional learning aspect, because that's a reality. And so we want our students to come back in and know that school is a safe place to land, and that things have been different. And now here we are again. Let's get back into the routine of school and the structure of school and the safety of school, whether it's, middle school or high school. There are things that we have here in our schoolhouse to help you feel safe and assured as a student in our building, which then translates to a feeling of safety and reassurance at the under your roof as well.
All right, Dr. Dru Tomlin, thank you so much for getting on with us. I imagine you're pretty busy right now, so we really appreciate your time. Nice getting to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Drew.